Episode 4. Here we are, Lim Disco. Today we have a cool guest, my friend Matthew Heinemann. Am I pronouncing that right? Heinemann?
Yes. Heinemann.
Okay. Sweet. I think I spelt it wrong on accident once, but
Most people forget the second N, but that's about it.
right. I
Like
think that's
me,
what I did.
I did. I did that.
Yeah.
Just Heine and man. It's really easy if you do it like that. Yeah.
Heinemann. Well, thanks for being here, man. Appreciate you being on and coming and doing this with us. You're our first interviewee. So basically, just kind of, want to get a quick little background on you. You've been living in Boulder for how long now?
11 and a half years, because it was June 2013 when I came.
Got you. Okay. And so what kind of brought you out here in the first place?
Originally, I came out here for my PhD in physics to start in grad school. And then throughout my journey, that switched to be a master's degree in material science instead.
Nice.
When'd you first hear about Boulder? I know there's the side when it comes to professionally, obviously there's a high concentration of science, right? But on the other side, when did it all start to make sense for you where you were like, that's where I want to go?
Honestly, it was my friend recommended it because they were also looking at it and they're like, oh, you should check this place out. Because I was applying to a bunch of different grad schools all over the country. I think I do is Berkeley, Texas A&M, some places, Chicago, or not Chicago, but Illinois, all over the country. And then out of all of them, I ended up applying here as well. And then this is where I got in. And so then it kind of, once I got in, they brought me out for a visit. And once you did that drive down into Boulder from the hill, you're like, all right, this is it. And I brought a couple of my friends with me because they were going to move with me when I did it. And we were like, yeah, dude, this is awesome. And
so what were those first year? So you said you had done your master's out here or
I ended up with my master's out here. I started in a different program, switched halfway through, got my master's and stuff.
Okay. What was that like being as someone who hasn't experienced the infamous, college scene out in Boulder? What was that like for you?
It's a little different as it's not like the undergrad scene. It's being a graduate student's a little different because technically when I would go out to the bars, I would see my students at the bars, which was interesting because I spent my whole time in grad school I spent as a TA.
Okay.
So lots of different students that I had, different departments, all this other stuff. But I mean, you still got that sort of college, you got the college view of Boulder since it's all surrounded, your life is centered around the university. And then since you're centered around kind of being in Boulder, you don't have a whole lot of time. So you're not really spending a lot of time outside of town. And I mean, Denver back in those days was a lot different than it is now. Rhino didn't exist. And so Boulder was kind of the cool place to be. And you were just kind of hanging out in all the local spots. And there was a bunch of things that don't exist anymore that existed back then that kind of kept you in the city itself. And it was kind of also just a new city. So you're discovering Pearl Street, you're discovering the hill.
From your perspective, it was a new city, right?
Yeah. And coming from, I'm from South Dakota, a land so flat that you can basically see the curvature of the earth to living in a little bowl where the mountains are there. It was just a whole wild world for me. And just getting used to just the mountain lifestyle, going skiing, all the things that you can do out here, hiking, all the different sports, all the things that growing up in the Midwest I never had, even though I did grow up skiing. So I had been to Colorado before, but I was so little that I had no idea where I was, but it was a mountain. But getting to be here and then getting to experience everything that Boulder had to offer, it was all new. All of the things that we all know, it was just experiencing it all for the first time. And so I had always heard about once you get here, you always hear about the bubble and you hear about, Boulder people are different, but growing up in a conservative place to being in a place that's probably one of the most liberal places ever. It was weird because I always never felt like I fit in where I grew up, and I never really fit in, even in my old undergrad college town, still fairly conservative area in Iowa. And so it was just different to finally feel like I belonged somewhere. And then sort of processing through what does it mean to belong in Boulder? What does it mean to belong in Colorado? What does it mean to be at this university? And 4 years of like getting to know the university, because it was different than my old undergrad university, which when you're doing physics and science it's really important about the professors and the cross section of people that are there.
Yeah.
And even in that field, like physics itself is like as broad as like all of sciences combined, to be honest, because like each individual little section of physics is its own little sort of school in its own.
Yeah.
And Boulder itself, with the national lab that's here and with NIST and NCAR, like that, it attracts a certain kind of scientists. And I had come to Boulder really for solar energy, because that was like what I had tailored my whole undergraduate career around, was doing solar energy research. So then really where I had always wanted to end up is down at the National Renewable Energy Lab down in Golden. And so I kind of fit in, and there was some sort of ties with the university there, but it was mostly geared towards the National Institutes of Standard and Technology, and that's like reinventing basic science. And I'm more of a hands-on sort of, let's deal with today's problems, or like a problem I can solve, not just like solve something 40 years down the road or try to invent new science that somebody's going to use 30 years after I'm gone or something like that. And so getting to understand that wasn't really for me, and that's what kind of directed the change for why I changed my programs. And then that also sort of changed my sort of life direction. So there was a lot of things happening all at once. I came in with a kind of a naive sense of what I thought I wanted, and then got to be in a brand new city, got to figure that out in real time. And then as you're doing that, you get all this, it's just like a whole different vibe in Boulder, because it's a completely separate from where I'm used to having, a lot of agriculture kids. That was half of my old school. To like a bunch of geology, like hippies that love crystals and rocks and like, just like that side of like the jam band culture in Colorado. And just, it was a huge culture shift for me, but it was a culture shift that I really embraced. And then I had to figure out where I fit in all of it.
Okay.
So with that, you first coming here, seeing some things that you wanted to change and really getting more of a footing and kind of like, going with a little bit of an identity with Boulder, how did that kind of play in, 11 and a half years or 11 years now you've been here. So how did that play into, like, let's say, your career acquirement, and more so like the things that kind of were the deciding factors for you to actually decide to make a life out here?
It didn't take me very long to realize that Colorado was definitely going to be my home. And then it was just more about figuring out how do I make this a home kind of thing? Because I love the mountains. I love the culture. I love the people. But in my degree, like I was going to be my original goal coming out here was to go and be in academia, be a professor, and had to give that up and change direction to say, like, this really isn't for me. I don't think I would be happy in that, to going to be like into industry and like or industry or research or something more like hands-on. Now let's fix the world's problems kind of thing. And then with that, you kind of change the people that you're around, and the group of people that I ended up with were a bunch of very like excited, like driven individuals that wanted to do stuff. And then when you have your little group and you explore what Boulder has to offer, especially when you're a student, you find the little nooks and crannies of Boulder that you really like, and you find the sort of things that Boulder has to offer. For me, I was never a person that really went up to the hill, because that was more for the undergrad kids. So like Pearl Street was really like, when I would go out, it'd be the Pearl Street, or it'd be like the Dark Horse, places like that. And those places really felt like home, like community style. And like even later in life, after I got out of school and I got into the service industry again, after the service industry, I really found that like those places you could find like the service industry people, and like you would find that you'd go out after work and like half the bar would be college kids, but half the bar would just be people getting off their restaurant jobs coming to go and have a drink or something after work. And then you find that sense of community. And as I've been here for longer, and as I've seen things change, especially through COVID and how my life path went through COVID, and then becoming back to Boulder, being a young professional, like once I didn't have, I've struggled finding that sense of community now here in Boulder. Like I kind of feel like an individual that's just existing in a city where I don't really know where I belong anymore. Yeah. Even though I really love the city in itself, and it's like, it's home, it's my home, but it's more like being an imposter in your own home.
It's interesting you say that. I think, I I think about Ventura, right? Like when you're in Ventura, it's like around surf rodeo, right? Everyone's going to surf rodeo. There are just those events, right? And I don't feel that in Boulder. And there are the events, and I've been to them. I came across them, and I went out for like the I think it's the art, like it's some sort of like music art thing, right? And the sad part is I don't even know what it's called. I've literally studied the amount of people that went there year over year, but I can't even remember what it's called, because when I went the last time, it was, a sea of like maybe a small sea of gray hair, right? And I think that there's something to be said about what you just kind of made light of. It was the whole programming of what's going on in your city. If the programming is coming from someone who is kind of not within the age cohort at all, there's just an assumption that, when I'm creating something or like whatever, if you're like 55, 60 years old and you're doing the same thing for 15 years in a row, and it's the same group of people and they keep getting older, and it doesn't mesh well with the younger crowd. Like for you, you're how old are you?
35, going on 36.
So you're a young professional, right? I fucking hate young professional, right? It's the worst.
Word, goddamn. The phrase or the label.
But if you were to put a label on it, right? See, I think it's that there's nothing for that group, but that group takes up a big chunk of people, and what you're saying is something that is I come across a lot, which is kind of the feeling of like I'm just floating out here. Right?
Well, even in like I'm thinking too, like comparative terms. So like you said, you used to feel that way, right? So if I'm not mistaken, like you still live in actual Boulder, right?
Yeah, still live here.
Own some property, I believe.
Yeah, I had to get that pretty like towards the middle of my graduate career, because it was just getting to the point where even back then I was getting like almost priced out for rent. Yeah. And it was at that point in my life, I didn't have a car. And so like living in the suburbs became an even like more barrier to the things that I had to do. I basically was living with a bike. And if I lived in the city, I could get everywhere I needed. I could do my job. I could get to campus. I could go do everything I needed to.
You could focus.
Yeah. And I didn't have to spend, 2 hours on a bus. And that was sort of the start of, once I finally graduated, that was what I was doing, was because I ended up getting a job in Golden at the lab after about a year of being in the service industry. And man, taking the bus from Boulder to Golden every morning is rough. And like, there's a whole story of like how I ended up doing it. And then luckily I had a friend that ended up moving to Denver. And so then I ended up spending a lot of time in Denver, and I literally crashed in their living room consistently, because it was easier to get the bus from Denver to my work than it was to live in Boulder and still do that.
So like during that time, I do want to tap in a little bit on like the whole bus aspect and how you've figured out the logistics of getting to and from work every day. But just kind of tapping back into what we were talking about as far as like comparative between what it is now in what's offered, or even just like the energy that surrounds Pearl Street, to what you actually felt back then, because you said like you actually did find a sense of community, right? And also that I haven't been here as long as you have, so like you were saying there's places that just used to be there that weren't there anymore, and I'm assuming it's changed the landscape.
There's a few things. So like the sense of like touching on the sense of community thing, it's like when I was in graduate school, like I had other friends that were either in, like I had classmates or other friends in graduate school, but then you also just end up meeting other kids in school. And so even though you're an older student, you're still finding people that are in school, and that whole life of like, okay, now I have this group of friends that I've met. And like some of them were through also, because I moved to Boulder with 4 other people, because that was the only way that we were going to be able to afford living here, is I brought 4 friends out with me. And so then through them, we met other people. And so we had this little circle, and that sense of community kind of came from having the people around you. And then I've lived in Colorado long enough, and people always complain about Colorado being this like transient state where, people are here for a short time, not a long time kind of thing. And so I've seen a lot of my friends come and go. And so like we're still friends, but they're now somewhere else or they've moved on. And so like when we're all in school together, it's that forced sense of community because we're all here for the same common reason. And then you have that circle that you can go out and enjoy things with. And a lot of the things in Boulder that they offer are like you go with a group or like you go with people, or even when you're at that age, like it's easier to go to places that are catered to younger kids where you are allowed, like it's okay for you to go and mingle around, like that you belong there because that's your bar, that's your style. But like even then the Hills changed. They've torn a bunch of the stuff that I used to think was super cool down to build like a hotel now. And then even just the things that were offered, like one of my favorite places was also always the Dark Horse. And like the coolest part of the Dark Horse, they used to have trike night where you would race tricycles around the bar. And they just don't do that anymore. And so like there were things like that. And it's just like when you were in that sense of like common ground community, it was easier to go out and like have people around, have people that you're doing. But as you age out of that, because people have graduated, they've moved on, they've done other things, like your group is smaller. And as your group gets smaller and smaller, you have to end up finding places that you can go to by yourself. And doing that gets harder and harder. And then what was the second part of your question?
It was, I guess, I don't know if it was like second part of my question, but I did want to like ask about your commute. I am curious of like how you actually figured that out without a car, going all the way to Golden every day.
Oh man, I'd have to wake up at 5:30. Like this is after I got the place that I've been living in for the last 8 years. It was in my condo. So I'd have to wake up at 5:30 in the morning to get on the Bolt to take me to downtown Boulder. And then I'd have to wait 45 minutes to get on the bus that takes you to Golden. And it took me right straight to my work. But that bus had like 4 buses in the morning and 4 buses in the afternoon. So if I had to be at work at 8 a.m., I'd have to be up at 5:30 in the morning if I wanted to take the bus to downtown if it wasn't too cold. Otherwise, I could get up later and then ride my bike to downtown, get on the bus that goes to Golden, and then stay at work until whether I was going to go back to Boulder or whether I was going to take the hour and a half long bus ride it takes to get into the city and go over to my friend's house. And then eventually at night, ride my bike to Union Station and then take the bus home, which is another hour. So just,
so like regionally, like, even just, from here to Golden, it's not super far, but it's super limited on access.
And everything just takes longer.
Yeah.
Sure. A drive from here to Golden takes 20 minutes, but the bus ride from downtown to Golden takes almost an hour because of all the stops that you have to take throughout town.
And that's pretty typical. I think it's just like, it's interesting. Like you say, like, you had to make a sort of trade-off, a little cost Benny, right? Mm-hmm. It was like, all right, do I send it into the city because it's getting late, or because, I'm not sure the reason, but it was probably because, this shit's going to take a long time. You can make a trip out of it almost. Or what was your reasoning behind
at that point, I'd been here
that?
for like 5 years. And then in that year where I was starting this new job and where I was doing this, my college roommate moved to town, but he moved to Golden, and then my other best friend moved in with them. So it was like my 2 big friends were in Denver, and all the people that I really knew in Boulder had moved on, because like at that point, being here for 5 years, if I knew a kid in college or if I knew other people in my programs, like a lot of the other grad students didn't live in Boulder because you can't afford it off of a graduate student salary. So they were in like Louisville or Longmont or somewhere outside the city. It got to a point where I just didn't really know anybody in Boulder anymore.
That's an interesting thing. And I know we're kind of bouncing around here, but I'm just like loving to hear it. I'm just being a sponge. I'm curious how you were able to figure out your housing, like the real estate that you've acquired. What was that like?
I mean, it was, so going all the way back to the beginning. So I moved here with 4 other friends, because I had a friend that had gotten a divorce. I had a friend that was coming here because the friend that actually recommended going to CU wanted to come to CU to get their degree. And so they came out with me, and then we had 2 other friends that were just like, hey, do you want to get out of Iowa? Because I had been in undergrad for 6 years, so all of my college friends were already done. They were just doing other stuff. It's like, hey, do you want to change? And so the 4 of us all moved, the 5 of us all moved out here together and grabbed this house that we were paying like $2,250 or something like that for a 4-bedroom house, where 5 of us were splitting it. So each one of us were only paying $450 a month for rent, which was great. But then that slowly started to get more and more expensive as I just went from my like second place that I lived in, which was I split a 2-bedroom apartment with one of my friends, paying like $750 a month each, because we were splitting a $1,500 a month rent. And then after that, trying to go from an apartment back to having some sort of house. And so then that house that we got, I think, was like a 3-bedroom small little house that we ended up having to pay like $2,200 to $2,300. So like even over just the few years that I lived here, I think, or even just the first house that we had, I think they were going to hike the rent up like $400 if we wanted to re-sign our lease. And so on a graduate student salary of like $25K, it gets to be real hard, especially when you get paid on a stipend, which you basically get all your money for the month in one check. And so then if your rent is 60% of what you get for the month, then you get to spend the next 4 weeks trying to ration out the rest of your money.
Yep.
And so it just got to be the point where we were getting priced out. Like my friend was just living off student loans because they were in school, and I was living off my salary plus student loans to make up the means that I needed to be able to afford living in Boulder. And so it was just like, this isn't going to work. We need to look for if we're going to stay here for forever, because both of us were like, you know what, this is where we want to be.
Yeah.
At that point, the housing market was already starting to take off and things were scarcity. And so my family helped us get into a place where we could get a small little condo that would be enough to live out through graduate school at least. And then after we both got out of school, figure out what we were going to do with it. We both ended up just staying in it for a while. They went to Denver for a while, but I've been in it for 8 years now.
Yeah.
And so that whole process in itself was a struggle. We got a real estate agent, but I think we looked at over 20 places and put in offers at over 4 to 5 places. And originally it was going to try to get a mortgage, but when you're getting, people putting in $20,000-$30,000 over asking price with cash offers, like you're not competitive in that kind of market. And so this is 2015 and it's only gotten worse since.
Yeah.
And so my parents helped us out so that it would basically look like a cash offer so that we could end up getting a condo. And so after that, it's been the place that I've been in. And my deal with my parents was I would do all the work to fix it up because I have enough carpentry skills to do that myself. So that's
you got that engineer brain
and brain. And then I lived with an architect. So between the two of us, we had a person had a person that designed it and a person that could do it. And so that was kind of the trade-off. And slowly over time, we've been trying to like buy it out from them basically. And that's been the way that we afforded it.
Now, so you were fortunate enough, right? And now it's kind of like, is it fortune being almost feeling like having equity in Boulder? It feels good, but at the same time, right now, probably maybe not. I don't know. I'm curious to know which way you sway.
Yeah, since you said it's different now than when you were a grad student. Is there a trade-off that you feel, or you said you even had some friends that like went down to Denver. Did you ever feel like that maybe you could have been better off outside of Boulder?
I was about this close to leaving before I got the job that I currently have, because it ended up being in Boulder. Okay. And so, but no, to be honest, I would describe the last kind of 6 years, if you subtract the 3 of my current job, like the 3 or 4 years before that, which was like 2019 to 2022, so like deep into COVID, like a lot of thinking was had of like, is this where I want to be? Because there's not a whole ton of jobs in Boulder, but there are some. I'm not in tech, I'm in engineering. And so there's not a whole lot of manufacturing jobs in Boulder. And so with my degrees and the things that you can do with them, like a lot of the prospects are in Golden, Littleton, like South Denver. And so my college roommate, his boyfriend, and my friend that I live with now, we almost went in on like a townhouse in Denver together. And like we were this close to moving in, but that was like $5,000 a month for like a 4-bedroom townhouse. And the thing that kind of tripped us up and stopped us from really ending up doing it is they wanted 2 months deposit. It was kind of just like, you want a $10,000 security deposit. If the 4 of us had a $10,000 security deposit, we probably wouldn't be renting this place.
Right.
But 2 weeks later, I ended up getting a job in Boulder. And so then it was 5 minutes from where I live. So it made no sense to leave. But
but you saw a lot of others leave, right?
Yeah. I honestly, even through grad school, like I didn't know many unless they lived in university housing. There weren't a lot of my friends that were my classmates that lived in Boulder.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say is like maybe some of the main reasons for that?
Price.
I'd say it's like the biggest reason, right? And I think that I always say, like, if kind of jobs and occupation and school, academia will drive them here, like, and it does, right? What's the thing that like retains them? Right? And I think it has something to do with sort of social infrastructure. Like, it would be way harder to fathom, like, being like, all right, I live close enough to Pearl Street, right? If Pearl Street was super fun, right? You'd be able to be like, okay, it's cheaper to live in Longmont, but I don't have that proximity to my third place or that place that I go to. But during COVID, there were just mass amounts of closings. And I think they were already stressed out just being with, the tax rate going up in general, just the cost of operation is really high. But during COVID, it was like all of a sudden, now you have this externality to sort of deal with that was seemingly impossible to deal with. And so I just think about it like, if there isn't the social infrastructure, it's way easier for me to be like, I'm going to go live in Superior, right? Because then I can enjoy being in between two different places. One that I don't know why, but I love, right? Boulder. And then Denver, where I have like a good time.
Right. Well, just more offerings, right? Which is like, I've heard.
No, I mean like a good time.
Yeah,
like I don't normally have. I'm just fucking with you, but sorry.
Well, good. Yeah, I
no,
know what
yeah,
you're saying.
yeah.
I know what you're
It's
saying.
From what I
subjective.
saw of like the people that could actually stay in Boulder, they had one of three things. It was like they either had family support to be able to stay here. Some of my friends actually, like, they're from here, and so they could live in their like parents' house, or their parents had a separate house or something, and they like were renting. They just lived in their parents' old house, or you just lived here with a ton of roommates. And it's like, as you like, I came here when I was 23, immediately turning 24. By the time I'm out of grad school and into my first like young professional job, I'm already 28. And it's at 28, it's like, do I want to have 5 roommates, or do I want, like, you're starting to think of that. You're at that point in your life. You're like, okay, now I'm out of school. I've got my degree. I've got a job. It's time for me to start my life. I want to start my life if I have a partner, and start to like, we got to work towards whatever. And it became that pressure to be like, I should be on my own now. And in a place like Boulder, it's really hard to do that.
That's a really, really fast. I didn't mean to cut you off,
No, go
but
ahead.
that's a really fascinating point. I think that when there is a supply shortage, right, and there is all of this, this feeling of wanting to be there, but making that cost benefit analysis, right, like constantly thinking like, fuck, is this worth it, right? If you do decide to stay in, and you do decide to, and you get lucky enough, or talented enough to acquire a job like you did, I feel like there is still a stunt of growth that somebody at 29, like for me, I think about it like, I'm still living with 2 roommates, these 2 knuckleheads, and I love it. And I think about it like with the cognitive dissonant, and I think, shit, should I love that? Like, am I at the place right now in my life that I should be? And I look at my parents, and again, cognitive dissonant, I can't do that because the price that, they could afford when they were 28 or even 25, right? Back then is entirely different now. And so being, in Boulder, that feeling is compounding, right? It stunts your growth. So you almost have a negative sort of association with it, and you do want to go. You do want to get out. And if, you're talented enough to get a job, and you're fortunate enough to just be able to plant some roots there, like, by all means, I think that's amazing. I personally feel like I'd be in this like conflict.
Oh no, absolute conflict. Like,
okay. I was
like
curious.
Everything
I was
that
like,
I was told growing up of what I'm supposed to want and have, like, is completely at odds with the way that life has played out. If you look at, especially just like my age is a weird like age where like I graduated high school 2007, bank crash. I graduated college 2013, housing crash. Yeah. I got out of grad school 2017. 3 years later, COVID. Yeah. And it's just like all of the milestones that you were like, you thought that you were going to have growing up, and like at this age, I'll have this, and at this age, I'll have this. I just had to rethink all of it. And then to the point of like asking myself, even though these are the things that I was told that I should want, like, are they the things that I actually want? Yeah. And like, or at the end of the day, like looking at the reality out of all of it, like I have a small 2-bedroom condo, and I've spent the last kind of 5 years in my mind realizing, you know what, I'm kind of okay with just this. Yeah. And it kind of, it's reinforced by the fact that like even my neighbors, like the community I live in, they're all people that have owned those things for almost 20 years. Yeah. And like they've been there and that's their home. And so like if it's good enough for them, why wouldn't it be good enough for me? But it's like that weird millennial drive that like you felt like you were always supposed to have this, you know, nuclear family and a little house somewhere and all that stuff. Yeah. And it's just like,
it's a societal sort of bullshit.
And so like when you say cognitive dissonance, it's like active, like it was an active thing for a lot of my time of being like, I'm not where I'm supposed to be in life. And then like recently have actually realized, you know what, I'm actually kind of happy and I think this is fine. Yeah. And I don't necessarily think I needed all those other things, but it was a hard pill to swallow. Yeah. And at the sense of like, is that a pill that I should have had to swallow? I don't know. But like, I've come to terms with the fact that it's where I live, it's what I can afford, and I don't necessarily need much else, but I know that's not a thing that some other people can swallow. And so like my roommate and like one of my friends, my other 2 friends, they're trying to buy a house, and the things that they look at, I'm like, you guys are crazy. Yeah. I mean, just go do that right
recently now. I saw a house that was just over 1,000 square feet. It was $750,000. And it was 0.12 or something of an acre. And then in Longmont, pretty much double all those numbers. Mm-hmm. Right. So it really is like right now it's really expensive in the housing market in general. And I think here is very interesting because there's just such a contrast, right? You just go over 17 minutes to the right or the other way, because there's only 2 ways in. And you're hit with this, you know, you're about to make a decision that's going to impact the rest of your life. You're about to get equity in something. And it's really, you know, a mortgage to me is not necessarily equity, right? A mortgage is stability, and it's a 30-year fixed mortgage, as opposed to, you know, increasing rental prices every single year. Mm-hmm. And so as I get pressed out as a renter, you know, you have to deal with the taxes, right, which are wild. But without getting too much into that, I actually kind of wanted to steer us into hospitality and ask you, what was your sort of decision was it to afford the cost of living in Boulder in order to supplement sort of the, you know, discretionary spending when it came to your decision to actually stick with hospitality as well as your normal, you know, it's not normal, by the way, you're an engineer. Like there's, you know, a particular amount of brain concentration in Boulder, and you're a part of that. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to hospitality, it's like, it's very different, right? So how was that living kind of in that duality?
Well, it's not really me going back to hospitality, because here's the thing. Like my whole life, I have been in restaurants, not necessarily as like a server role, but like my first job in high school when I was like 16 was being a delivery driver for a pizza restaurant and a dishwasher. And my college job was being a delivery driver for Jimmy John's. My first job when I came to Boulder was being a delivery driver for Deli Zone. And in between all of that, I also drive Lyft at night. So like I've always been somebody that's like, I like the service industry and I just like the people aspect of it. I like it's kind of a sense of community. It's a sense of like you get to have small conversations with a bunch of different people all over. And so my reason for going back to it after spending a good solid 2.5 years just going gung ho at my salary job was it wasn't getting me anywhere. Like I was working 70 hours a week at my job, trying to push for like a promotion or something, and realizing that that wasn't giving me work-life balance. Like I was just diluting my salary. And so it was sort of a forced way to make more money while I'm still a person that likes to work a lot. But then also at the same time, it's a weird sense of work-life balance, because even though I'm still working 70 hours a week, I'm forcing myself to not work 70 hours a week at my other job.
Yeah.
But then it was a necessary thing, not for any discretionary spending, but to just recoup all the debt I have gained over the years of living in Colorado, and especially living through COVID, being unemployed. And
we're living in Boulder.
Well, living in Boulder in general, but like, the first 7 years I spent in Boulder, I was making less than $30,000. And then the first job I got out of college, I was making closer to $60K. But even at that point, that was like 2.5 years. And then COVID hit, I broke my leg. I was on unemployment for a full year, not working.
Oh, wow.
And then the year after that, my in-between job between unemployment and actually getting an engineering career was being a lecturer at MSU Denver for a year, making maybe $20,000 for the year, just teaching. And I was a really good professor, but it wasn't making me any money. I would have done that for the rest of my life. But I realized that I needed to, but as a master's student, I can't actually get tenure because I don't have a PhD.
Makes sense.
And it was
the experience was,
I loved it because I was a TA I have like 7 years of teaching experience at this point, 7 or 8, because in undergrad I was a TA, and graduate school I was a TA, actual lecturer, professor. And it was funny because I actually applied for my job that I have now while proctoring the final that I was doing for my students at MSU Denver, and got a call back like a week later and got a job offer 2 days after that. And so it was sort of like, it was definitely luck and time and place, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
finally, after working there for 2 years, like I was getting to a point where I could get by, but I wasn't, I was surviving, but not thriving.
Yeah.
And doing a little bit extra, like going back into hospitality, having this other like job, getting some extra money was nice. But like what I really liked about it was the people that I met. And like, honestly, that saved my life to a certain point, because I met all these really good people that also cared about me. And like that part of it was why I stuck around, even though the job sucked. And so, but it gave me enough money to now get to the point where I can be ahead and actually feel like, for the first time in 11 years of living in this state and in this city, that I'm actually in a good spot. And it's crazy that it took that long.
And so hospitality was kind of the moat, in a sense. It was kind of like a way to not only feel like some sort of, obviously it's a stark difference from what you're doing. There's certain rigor,
I'd say it was like the little, like you threw me the like life's, like the buoy, whatever you want to call it. Like I've been treading water, trying to keep my head above it for the longest time. And that's the thing that allowed me to just float in the ocean and be happy.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny too, how you say like you enjoyed the service industry, fumble. You enjoyed the service industry too for, one being for the people, right? Obviously to get some sort of supplementary income to what you already have. But as someone who's, I've done, I would say like a career in the service industry, even though I have done other things as well. But there is that social kind of fix that you need, because it's one thing. Like I did a little bit of agriculture. I worked in the California cannabis industry for a little bit. Learned so much. Didn't really work with the plants, but it was like I did logistics, like helped do like inventory management, then like end product quality management. And you deal with people like you would at any other job, but it's like when you work in the service industry, it's different, and you're obviously providing a service, but it's all centered around, people relaxing, enjoying themselves, and kind of, taking a break from that work world that we see, even though that is work as well. But it was like that life raft, don't you? There's something that you get from working in a job like that. And then there's also like a certain kind of level of almost like grittiness, even though you're not digging ditches necessarily.
No, it's like when you're working at a bar, when you're working in the kitchen or something like that, it's not like being in the trenches in war or whatever you want to call it, but like you're working a very physically demanding job, and emotionally and like
Emotionally,
taxing,
mentally
taxing
yeah.
job. And then you have these people that you're there doing it with you, and like those kind of bonds that you forge with those people are lasting. And then for me, like the way my mom raised me to be and like the person that she is, because I'm basically her copy with a Y chromosome, but it's like you care about the people around you, and that's the kind of like what has always given me something that's to live for, is like I take care of the people around me. And
right, and that's like the name of the job when you're in the service industry. You're taking care of your guests, your customers,
and taking care of your coworkers.
Yeah,
too.
absolutely.
And so like that's just what kind of gave me the life raft, is what it's all of that.
Yeah.
Feeling that sense of community.
Because I learned through COVID, I might be a very introverted engineer like every other one that you can think of, but like, man, I need people, and I need people to be in my life because I need them and they need me.
It's
and that's
funny,
what makes me happy.
It's funny you told me that when we first met that you were like introverted, and obviously being that we met as bartenders, I was like, this guy's not introverted, no way.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, I
could see it being an outlet. I could also seeing it being, I mean, I think about it like from being, I don't know if you're in a lab now, right?
Clean room, lab, office, meetings, whatever you want to, all of it. I've been in at my other job, it was more like I was a technician. And so the thing I like about my current job is that my first job was being a technician. And so that at my now job, like all I care about is the technicians, and like I bring them up. I try to train them. I try to help them improve their livelihood, teach them everything I can. Cause I'm one person that it's like, if I have knowledge, all I want to do is share it with you. I don't need to keep it. That was not the point of it. The point of it was for me to share it with everybody else around me.
Yeah.
And so
isn't that funny? It's like, man, you know, to get away from the duality and just kind of hit, you know, hospitality for what it is. I always think it's like what you said earlier it kind of stuck with me, because it was something that I always say, like me and John kind of know this, is like being in the Marine Corps. You know, we loved the clowns. We didn't necessarily, like, I don't have any feelings towards the circus, right? But, you know, there are establishments that you can look back on probably and be like, actually, the circus was great too. Like, it kind of made the clowns who they were, and kind of like the whole idea of having a hierarchical sort of structure too in hospitality that also kind of parallels the military in a weird way. I always saw it was that you have the busser, you have the dishwasher, you have all these, and then there is a kind of ladder, right? To an extent.
So you calling us clowns over here? No, just kidding.
Yeah, but I mean, if you think about what you just said about knowledge sharing, right? Not keeping your people stupid, right? But actually like empowering them, right? To get to that next position. And I feel like in a profession, you know, on the science side, right? It's like that's the goal, is to, you know, improve and have continuous improvement and rise up a little bit, right? Now I'm curious to hear your opinion on sort of the ecosystem of Boulder that is now, right now, not like 10 years ago, but right now. Is there a kind of lacking of that sort of that upbringing, that feeling of camaraderie maybe there?
Are you saying like in the hospitality scene?
In the hospitality scene.
In particular?
In particular, the hospitality scene. So is there a sense of like is there a glass ceiling, or is there a way up? Or do you feel like the people who come in, it's kind of purposeful to keep you at a certain level of knowledge? And when you start asking questions or whatever, is asking questions good, or is asking questions bad?
I was wondering where the clown aspect was going to circle back around. I was
if you think about it like its own little ecosystem, right?
Yeah, no,
there's
going to
be people who come and go, right? But there's also this feeling of like, I can grow in this place. For sure. Right? And maybe I didn't make that clear, sorry. But
yeah, no, I knew he was coming back around, but I was I
was like, just bear with me for 1
second. From my current experience, I think it depends on where you fall in the ladder. Like, I think the people, like bartenders to barbacks and servers, I think bartenders are always trying to bring their people up. Yeah. And so like, if you're in the middle, you're always trying to help the people beneath you. But when you try to look up or no, their questions are definitely not appreciated when you try to talk to management, I don't think.
So there isn't a really like the growth sort of mindset, which is honestly like, you know, to ask questions is way more valuable than to just take an answer, right? And like to ask questions is so valuable in somebody who comes in who's green and, you know, who's fresh, and is that feeling of like, you know, that freshness, like if you do X really hard, right? If you go as hard as you can in your job, are you ever told that, you know, keep doing what you're doing because the next step is this or whatever? Or is it kind of like everyone's in this solid sort of state and, you know, and then there's the others?
It's not just hospitality that's like that.
Yeah.
It's all the industries I've worked in are like that too.
Yeah.
Like it's more of a rampant thing than you would think. And it's not centered on only hospitality industry. It's a problem in America, I'd say. And it's a problem in Boulder for sure, but it's a problem in America for sure as well.
Yeah,
I will say, touching on the confinement of I think where you're trying to go with it, as far as like A, in Boulder in particular, and then B, specifically the hospitality industry.
To build off what you're saying, like it's not everywhere. Like
right, there are definitely places, but
there are places, but like I've worked at places that it's not like that. Like it's like, and it's a culture that comes from the top down, to be honest. Like when you establish a culture, which is usually management that has to establish that culture, then those are the places that are really nice to work at, and like they're really good to their employees. They really appreciate the feedback. Like one of the restaurants I worked at, like one of their like cooks came in, he was just really creative, and like all of the things that he did became the specials for the week because everybody just ate it and were like, this is amazing. Right. Like, this is what we're going to do now. And like, they just gave, like, then because of that, they got creative freedom. And like, they got to do, like, they would do all sorts of new stuff, and like, they would just incorporate it into their menu and all this other stuff. And so like, when you have that kind of style of restaurant structure, like, there's a lot of open possibilities you get when you let your people do the things that they're good at. And then, it was appreciated at the place I was working at by the staff, but not necessarily, and like some of the management, but like there was also a sense of like,
makers,
just stick to the script is the other kind of like style that you get.
And when it comes from within, there's a sense of pride, right? So if a recipe from the back of the house gets on the menu, right? I love that because like I think cooks, bartenders, they're kind of like tacticians, right? They're like very specialized. And especially when they're, you know, the craft bartender, right? Like there's a certain level, right? But at the same time, if you have somebody who's curious and who's also like thinking outside the box, right? And you get something on your menu, I just think about it like it's almost like that breeds the culture. And when you outsource it and you bring it in from outside, you never give the opportunity, or seemingly, you never really give the opportunity from within to actually, you know, invoke some sort of change or things that you guys all could be proud of. And so I think about that a lot because there's a lot of outsourcing here. There's a lot of like, let's go hire that one consultant from Denver to come in, the same guy. You know, it's kind of.
I think what adds to that issue, I guess, is the fact that there's a limited amount of people that really kind of run the hospitality scene in Boulder. And I know you can probably speak on this too, considering that you've seen so many places come and go. It's like now, especially after COVID, when you have places that have been there for so long, and then you have a very finite group of people that kind of own all the other places, and then you have that like top-down attitude, right, from the management. There's like a common attitude that's being used post-COVID to kind of address the business as it operates, right? Whereas like when you get new entrants, that's when you have fresh blood, when you have people that have the opportunity to disrupt in a positive way and to operate their business in a way that is competitive in a good way, and that just adds the diversity in the sense of not only what you're offering to the guests, but your type of the type of workplace that you're providing.
Yeah. To go back,
what I've seen is just like there are definitely the Boulder establishments, that don't change, and then what you see coming in new is not some like new and bright idea. It's some sort of like other restaurant. Well, it's either a restaurant group chain where it's like, oh, they're just opening up a location here, versus like somebody coming in with like a brand new thing, and the innovation gets real stale. Is what it is. And like what I would describe, like, in my being in Boulder now, living in Boulder for the last 3 years, working in Boulder, and being here now after the end of like 11 and a half years, what I would say is like, I love Boulder. It's a beautiful place, but it's also really boring because there's not a whole lot of stuff that's super exciting, because everything that's here, I could also go to Denver and get. Like, it's not, it's nothing unique. There's nothing game changing. There's nothing that's like a new and bright idea. It's people from Denver coming to Boulder and opening up a new location, or
we're
trying it out here for a while. And then like the sadder part is when you see older establishments that you've liked for forever start to close, or you walk around and you just see all the empty buildings.
Well, do you know, are there, like, have you, being the time that you've lived here, are there like, community groups or outings that is kind of around? Because I've heard a good amount, but for the most part, they're usually all based around like bike rides or like running up in the Flatirons.
Thursday night.
I'm curious if you've come across any, or if there's anything that you've like kind of stuck towards that's just kind of resonated with you in particular, or just what do you think about offerings in general?
It's all active groups. Like, and there's nothing wrong with active groups. Like, to be honest, that's where some people meet their community. But like, if you want something outside of an active group, like if you just want a social group, like I'm in a weird age where like it's social groups, but then it's, people with families. I'm trying to find like the single young professional social
where they're not
group.
like overly networking too. Like that is a thing for sure. It's like sometimes the best networking is not from a networking event.
Like if you're a driven like professional that's trying to like climb a ladder or something, it's like, no, I'm just trying to go out and like, I just want to meet a friend. Like, I just want to meet friends. Yeah. And like, or I want to go out and find my like new not a hard group, ask. Or like just find a place that I can go to where I just enjoy the community of the space. And there's the towny bars. There's like the stuff that has been here forever that are old establishments where you're meeting like people that have lived in Boulder their whole life, and then you get to hear their life story and all that other stuff, but at the same time you're still an outsider to them. And then there's the like the bigger problem in Boulder, what I find is that like there's not spaces for individuals to go. Like there's like, just like everything, like if it's a restaurant, you're going with a group, or if there's tables, you're going with a group and sitting at the table with your group. There's not some sort of space that really like promotes the intermingling of like a younger professionals, except like I could go to a college bar, sure, and just go get drunk and talk to people, but like that's not really what I'm looking for.
That's so funny, because that's what I feel. I'm like, damn, like I've actually had some good times talking to these college kids, because I actually get like a bit of what I'm looking for, right? But it's at the same time, it's like there's a certain line of relativity and like what you're looking for. And it's like we're at very different ages, as far as the college scene versus where we're at,
And a lot of those spaces are also kind of mixed. Like a couple of like the super towny places, like if you want to call out, I don't know if you want to call out names, but like places like the Pub or places like the Dark Horse, like it's half and half.
Those are great places.
They're
so
great places.
You could call them out.
They're half and half. Like it's like, I love the Pub. It's been my place for forever on Pearl Street, and then the Dark Horse has been my place off Pearl Street, and then every now and then the good old Outback Saloon. But like, other than that, like, what else do you have? Yeah. Like, what other spaces are there that like are for people to come together? Like you have Rayback, but it's become more of a family space.
Yeah. So there's a lot that goes into it, right? And I think being in this weird liminal sort of space or age, even, right? It's like I'm certain that the distaste or the feeling of like the association of Boulder and this feeling it comes from being priced out and having what you thought was going to be something awesome turn out to be, all your friends leave, or you're one of those people who just kind of like, fuck, I can't afford it. So I think what we're trying to, invoke or really just discuss first is kind of like your situation is so unique, but it's not, right? It's almost a story that's told over and over again. You just have a different kind of twist on it. And I really like the fact that you're in both hospitality and you're a young professional. And to have that sort of perspective is the unique part, right? The part that's not unique is the part where all your friends, have gone their different ways because they're being priced out, or because the sort of diminishing vibrancy that you've personally seen. It's not an anecdote, or I guess it is, but it's not if it's a trend, right? If it's quantifiable, you can actually see all the businesses that have closed. And I think it's really important to hear from you and not just the same, people talking in the daily camera and talking about how, and I don't give a shit, I'll say daily camera, whatever, talking about how awesome Boulder is to all these outside perspectives and driving all these people out here for them to experience the same thing. It is a false advertisement at the end of the day, but it's not one that can't change. Like,
right.
What can change about it is,
or like false to a degree.
Yeah.
Right? There are, like how you're saying, like, it's not like the outdoor groups are like bad by any means. There is a massive community of that out here. And then, other opportunities as far as like what surrounds Boulder, right? Is the labs and everything, like you're saying, the job opportunities. But there is like one of those aspects where it's like, oh, there's things that you quickly realize when actually coming here, and it's like, the cost of living, one, right, huge thing, and then sort of the diminishing value of after you experience your college life out here, and so I think that's an interesting aspect that I'm
super stoked that we got you on. It's our first interview.
Super stoked. I always kind of like, not always being here first, but I want to kind of have it on an end note of you being here 11 years, being in two different types of industries, and really seeing a lot of the changes that have happened. What are some things that maybe you think that you would either like to see happen, or that you think would be a positive addition? Just anything that you feel like might add to just quality of life, living here.
I mean, people always talk about like keep Boulder weird, or like keep Boulder strange, and all this other stuff. They want this identity of a place that, like, especially if you talk to the people that have lived here their whole lives, that they miss. And like, that's why they're angry. That's what the things that they've seen change. And like, what I want to see is like more spaces for other groups. Like, Boulder's becoming kind of like like you've said, like it's advertised outside people as being this great space, but like when you really get down to it, it's kind of a facade. Like it's beautiful, it's pretty, but what is there behind the face of it, kind of thing. Yeah. And so places with substance, places with community, places with meaning, places where like spaces for people to go that aren't just, okay, we're just going to meet up at Chautauqua and then go grab a beer somewhere. Like places where you don't, like, it's not just about going there with the people you already know, but spaces that allow and like facilitate you meeting others. Cause I don't think that those spaces kind of exist. It's all, if you look at Pearl Street in general, it's restaurants and a few dive bars. And like, where is the middle ground? Like, where is the spaces where it's like this is a bar, but it's meant it's like a social place. Like, where is the social, like spaces for people that aren't
food halls
in college, like that aren't college students, that aren't for families. They're like, where, like, if Boulder loves to promote itself as the best space for young professionals, well, like not all young professionals are in families, especially as times go on and people get we
have a declining birth rate.
Yeah, you're on
like
your,
statistically.
Like you're on your own. Like a lot of people are looking for a space where they belong, and I don't think that those exist anymore. It's like spaces for the people that have been here forever and they just want to sit at a bar and have their drink and not say anything to somebody, or it's a restaurant where you're going to go out and eat with the people that you're with and then go home. Like, where does that in between space exist? Because that, And where
Yeah.
does that sense of like culture and community that all of the people that seriously love Boulder, where did that go? Where, like, I don't think it's like becoming kind of a shell of what it used to be.
Yeah.
And that's just in the time that I've been here. And I'm not yearning for like, oh, there's too many people. There's like all the stuff that like some of the natives are like, oh, I don't like that. It's more just like, where did Boulder's soul go? And I don't know if it even exists anymore.
Yeah. And it's just final thing. It's a Western expansion state. Everyone's a transplant. I don't know how to explain this. To me, it's always been mind blowing that like we take Boulder and like the identity is found with like progressive sort of young people. And then they turned into their worst nightmare, right? Their enemy is like the establishment, right? How ironic is that? And then before them, it was a bunch of conservatives that were here. So what is the Boulder sort of ethos or identity? I think it's forever sort of changing, and Boulder's usually at the forefront of that change. And now that it's not, it feels stale, it feels elitist, and it sucks.
Denver is by far outpacing Boulder when it comes to those changes. And it's like, you know, if you look at my life, I've been here for over 11 years, right? This is the longest place I've choose to live. If you cut out, like, you know, you grow up your first 18 years where you're born, that's not a place you chose. This is the longest place I've chosen to live, and I by far count this as my home. Every time I get off of a flight and I see those mountains at the Denver airport, I'm like, oh God, I'm so happy to be home. But how do I make Boulder actual feel like a home? Like, it's where I live, but it doesn't necessarily feel like a home anymore.
Yeah. I think we're touching on that. I think that's what the whole goal of this is to find community and to find sort of that like-mindedness, but also not being okay with talking to people that are different and come from different subcultures, having that liminal sort of that liminality, right? Cross-pollination. There isn't a place, and I think that's kind of hitting it on the head, right? And we recognize it, and we want to know if there's others who agree, right?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and with that, I mean, I know we could talk probably for another hour at least, you know, and I want to. I think we are up on time here. Thanks again so much for taking the time to do this with us. Appreciate you very much, man.
Thanks for having me, guys.
We'll if you are, you know, basically wanting to reach out to us, if you have a comment on any of the things that are said, and we'll get back to you if there are any comments. There's a link in the description. It's literally just one text away. It's super easy. Other than that, I think we're out, right? We're done?
I think we're good.
All right, episode 4, that's a wrap.
Cheers, you guys.
Cheers.